a new canto. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Jacharanandana Braja Janaranjana Jacharanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivar Jagacharya Sutara Sutta Shri Shima Divine Grace of Bhaktivedanta Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Gaur Premanandi All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to some of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru, Sri Gauranga, and Srila Prabhupada. So we'll read a little bit from Srila Prabhupada's Leela Amrita, Volume 6. This chapter is titled, The Lame Man and the Blind Man. We were reading about last week the Prabhupada coming to New York, and he made a very bold declaration. He said, although Srila Prabhupada's triumph was that the early days of struggle were over, when he recalled them, he was immersed in a very special, sweet remembrance. He changed from one mood to another and sometimes mixed them. The days of his helpless, utter dependence on Krishna when no one else was present, and his present satisfaction surrounded by hundreds of faithful disciples. While remembering the old days, he was now realizing his original goals for ISKCON New York, the beacon light for our worldwide propaganda. In the late afternoon, as the sun was setting, Srila Prabhupada liked to sit on the roof of his skyscraper, and his disciples would sit with him. Although the building was in Midtown, being situated on the west side, afforded it a feeling of distance from the intensity of mid-Manhattan. Prabhupada would look out at the Manhattan skyline, and a breeze from the Hudson would ease the July heat. One evening, some of the devotees described to Srila Prabhupada some of the abominable activities going on in the city. They told him of prostitution and pornography, of acts of rampant criminal violence, and of the strange fetishes and fads of the flesh eaters, including the eating of human fetuses. This means, Srila Prabhupada, that we are actually preaching to animals. One night on the roof, Rameshwar Swami asked Srila Prabhupada to reveal his plan for conquering the world with Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada was silent. Finally he said, "No, because if I tell you my plans, then they may be spoiled." He had a plan, he said, but they were not ready for it. The Rath Yatra procession with its 3 50-foot tall carts began the Grand Army Plaza on 5th Avenue and proceeded downtown. Young men, girls in saris, Indians, New Yorkers, hundreds tugged at the ropes, pulling the gigantic chariots, with silken towers billowing yellow, green, red, and blue in the wind. Slowly and majestically, the carts sailed south. The parade was complete with beautiful weather, hundreds of chanting and dancing devotees, and thousands of onlookers. And the route was some 50 blocks down 5th Avenue, the most important street in the world, to Washington Square Park. At 34th Street, Srila Prabhupada joined the procession. As he came forward to board the chariot of Subhadra, the devotees converged around him, amazing the policemen and other onlookers with their spontaneous adoration of Krishna's representative. Although the inner meaning of the Rath Yatra is the gopis' desire for Krishna to return to Vrindavan, these devotees were more absorbed in Srila Prabhupada's return to New York. It was a gorgeous, appropriate climax to Prabhupada's 10 years of preaching in New York City. When he had first come, he had no money, no place of his own to live, and no place for people to congregate and hear about Krishna. Now he was riding in splendor down 5th Avenue at the Rath Yatra festival, and his Radha Govinda deities had a skyscraper. In 1965, he had been alone on the street. Now he was accompanied by 600 disciples, loudly singing the holy names and benefiting millions of conditioned souls. In front of Subhadra's cart walked Jayananda, holding his steering tongue, keeping the cart on course. As Prabhupada sat comfortably on the cart, he fondly glanced at Jayananda from time to time. Jayananda, steering with his left hand, would hold his right hand upraised, cheering Prabhupada's Rath Yatra and rallying the others to pull the ropes and chant Hare Krishna. When the procession arrived, Washington Square Park was crowded with people. A temporary stage had been erected, and Srila Prabhupada and the deities took their place. Kirtanananda Swami introduced Prabhupada before the crowd, and Prabhupada stood up to speak. Beginning by explaining the significance of Rath Yatra, Srila Prabhupada told the story of how the Jagannath deities were carved at the request of the king of Orissa over 2,000 years ago. When the king had disturbed the sculptor before the deities were completed, the sculptor had left. But the king decided, "I shall worship this unfinished deity. Never mind." So the devotee is offering, Prabhupada continued, and Krishna accepts. If it is offered with love and affection, he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Palam Toyam Yome Bhakti Prayachati. Krishna says, anyone who offers him a little flower, a little water, a little fruit with love and affection, I take them, I accept them. That means that even the poorest men in the world can worship God. There is no hindrance. Ahoitakiya pratiyata. Devotional service cannot be checked by any material condition. There is no restriction of caste, or creed, or country, nation. Anyone can worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead according to his means. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 1, chapter titled Questions by Vidura. So I'll read through text 1 and the translation. And since we're doing text 1 and 2, we'll repeat and do the word for word for text 2. Shri Sukovacha evam etat pura prishto maitreyo bhagavan kila chatra varang pravistena tyaktva swagriyam ridyamat. Shukadev Goswami said, after renouncing his prosperous home and entering the forest, King Vidura, the great devotee, asked this question of His Grace Maitreya Rishi. Text 2, and this we'll chant and repeat. Yadva ayang mantra kritvo, Yadva ayang mantra kritvo, Bhagavan Akileshvaraha. You should repeat 3. Now we're doing 3-2. 3-2 has the purport. We just read through 3-1. So we're in the repeat phase. But I'll start again for your benefit. So we're chanting 3-2. 3-2. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 1, text 1 and 2. So we're chanting text 2. Yadva ayang mantra kridvo, Bhagavan Akileshvaraha, Pauravendra grihang hidva, Prabhiveshat masat kritam, Yadva ayang mantra kridvo, Bhagavan Akileshvaraha, Pauravendra grihang hitva, Prabhiveshat masat kritam, Yadva ayang mantra kridvo, Bhagavan Akileshvaraha, Pauravendra grihang hitva, Prabhiveshat masat kritam, Yadva ayang mantra kridvo, Bhagavan Akileshvara, Pauravendra grihang hitva, Prabhiveshat masat kritam, Yat, the house. Vai, what else is there to say? Ayang, Shri Krishna, Mantrakrit, minister. Va, you people. Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead. Akila Ishvaraha, the Lord of everything. Pauravendra, Duryodhana, Griham, house, Hitva, giving up, Prabhivesha, entered, Atmasat, identify with oneself, Kritam, so accepted. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. What else is there to say about the residential house of the Pandavas? Sri Krishna, the Lord of everything, acted as your minister. He used to enter that house as if it were his own, and he did not take any care of Duryodhana's house. Please repeat. What else is there to say about the residential house of the Pandavas? Sri Krishna, the Lord of everything, acted as your minister. He used to enter that house as if it were his own. And he did not take any care of Duryodhana's house. Purport. According to the Gaudiya Achintya Bheda Bheda Tattva philosophy, anything which satisfies the senses of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna is also Sri Krishna. For example, Sri Vrindavan Dham is non-different from Sri Krishna. Tat Dhamma Vrindavanam. Because at Vrindavan, the Lord enjoys the transcendental bliss of his internal potency. Similarly, the house of the Pandavas was also the source of transcendental bliss for the Lord. It is mentioned here that the Lord identified the house with his own self. Thus, the house of the Pandavas was as good as Vrindavan, and Vidura should not have given up that place of transcendental bliss. Therefore, the reason for his quitting the house was not exactly family misunderstanding. Rather, Vidura took the opportunity to meet Rishi Maitreya and discuss transcendental knowledge. For a saintly person like Vidura, any disturbance due to worldly affairs is insignificant. Such disturbances, however, are sometimes favorable for higher realization, and therefore Vidura took advantage of a family misunderstanding in order to meet Maitreya Rishi. Om Gana Tamrandasya Garanjana Shlaka Chakshor Anvalatamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Gurum Yat Kripatam Aham Bande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. This is very significant, especially according to time and circumstances. We see that Maitreya, there's always a dual understanding. Prabhupada is very expert at distilling these dual meanings. That the house of the Pandavas was not any ordinary griha associated with the dark well of household life. There, the center of attraction, attention, affection was none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who self-identified not just with the house of the Pandavas, but with the Pandavas themselves as their friend, brother, minister. This was such an intimate connection, it is difficult to fathom what was the austerities performed by the Pandavas to receive such a benediction, to become the family members of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is inconceivable. But yet we see that Maitreya, whose relationship to the Pandavas is through Dhritarashtra, he himself also closely identified with the Pandavas as opposed to the home of Duryodhana, who's technically was his nephew. It's very interesting that these relationships are not merely based on blood connection, but on affection based on the transcendental appreciation of the position of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in this way, all living entities have the same opportunity to relate if they accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead as their dearmost friend, as their well-wisher, as their Lord and Master. And so that in any place, just as it's described here, Maitreya had no real reason to leave. And that this dispute between himself and his half-brother was technically an insignificant affair. He was trying to give some good advice to Dhritarashtra, but Dhritarashtra was not in a position to hear anything contrary to the plans of his son. So therefore, technically it was a fruitless endeavor for Maitreya to even attempt to give advice. And Chanakya Pandit also gives counsel in this regard, that one should not give advice. When he has any understanding that it will not be taken. So good advice given to someone like that is actually creates a problem for that person. Because as we see, the advice by being rejected put him in an awkward position where he had no choice technically but to leave. Yeah? So this is the complications of politics, especially in the kingdom. There's always some politics. Palace intrigue, it is called. Palace intrigue. These forces vying for power. And Maitreya should have seen and made his decision independently, without attempting to influence Dhritarashtra. But he felt, as his half-brother, that he had some obligation. But actually, this obligation was based on some material consideration. And so it could have been ignored. And he could have maintained his relationship. He didn't have to leave. But as the purport describes, he took the opportunity to meet Rishi Maitreya. And therefore, the opportunity to expand the volume of the Srimad Bhagavatam for the benefit of those who would come afterwards, like the denizens of Kali Yuga, who have no real shelter. And without the Bhagavad Purana, everything is simply darkness. This Bhagavad Purana is as brilliant as the sun. And therefore, in the absence of Sri Krishna, it is the literary incarnation meant for the deliverance, upliftment of the general mass of people. And this, just like now there are so many disturbances in worldly affairs, and many people don't know what to do. And in the absence of real knowledge, they take shelter of false prophets. And this is told in many scriptures, that there will be many such persons who, appearing as authorities, give some instruction, but they are not for the real benefit of the living entity. They simply keep him in a conditioned, an even more conditioned state, a more subjugated state, a more dependent state, right? Where instead of giving any real protection, they're only propagating fear and misery. Right? But for one who has taken shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has no fear. He understands that whatever happens in this material world is happening by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, one way or another, directly or indirectly. And then Bhagavad Gita clearly says, Abhutanama Dharmasya. So Krishna is wherever there's irreligion, and now there is no question that irreligion is prominent and dharma is minimized. So therefore, it is the duty of those who have access to this knowledge to assimilate it and propagate it. It is not just sufficient that we take satisfaction in our own realization and liberation, that we have nothing more to do. Having achieved this state, technically, what more is there to achieve? This is, for all intents and purposes, the perfection of human life. To be situated in the temple, to be worshiping the deity, This is factual liberation. And so there is no need to pursue any other course of activities. But yet, as we've heard many times, the Uttamadhikari descends to the Madhyama platform simply to preach. Simply to preach. So, therefore, following in the footsteps of such great souls, who are prominent in our line especially, Srila Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, they have given ample ammunition to fight the battle against the effects of Kali Yuga and to keep at bay those forces which would overwhelm civilization. And this is actual business of religion, to maintain. Here it's called, we know that the Srimad Bhagavatam, this canto is called status quo. It says it in the cover leaf. There's always a subtitle. Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, the status quo. So the understanding of the status quo is how it should be, not how it is. How it should be. Some people say we want to return to the status quo, but which status quo? Their status quo, Krishna's status quo. So the status quo is measured by the transcendental yardstick, not by any material measurement. And so the status quo is that the center for all activities should be the worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that this should be the conclusion that is distributed, that anyone who wants to know what is the perfection of life, the perfection of life is Sarva Dhamma Pratyaja Mam Ekam Sharanam Bhaja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto Krishna. He will deliver you from all fear. Deliver you from everything. Whatever calamity, whatever horrible thing one can imagine, like they were describing to Prabhupada on the rooftop, the degradation. This is, who can even imagine? This is described in the symptoms of Kali Yuga, that at the end of the age, people will have children simply to eat them. People are thinking, oh, how can this be? But yes. It is already taking place. People have justified that this body is simply a lump of flesh. And what is the difference between one lump of flesh and another lump of flesh? Since time immemorial, there have been cannibals. Right? We read about it in Mahabharata, and the great demons, Hidimba and others, they're all cannibals. They relish human flesh. And so since time immemorial, such demons are there. But now again, they're becoming prominent. So you have to fight them. And how do you fight ignorance? You fight ignorance with knowledge. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andhakar. So this is the masthead motto of Bhagavad Gita, of Back to Godhead. Prabhupada's personally carried on the publication single-handedly. Such a potent vehicle for delivering the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. So we have this legacy. And along with this legacy comes obligation. It is not that we simply take some diksha, some mantra, and then we think, okay, my business is finished. No. This business is, I have to carry out the order of my spiritual master. That is the meaning of disciple, discipline. To control the mind, to control the senses. For what purpose? So that I may become an effective instrument, in the hands of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna and my spiritual master. The two are non-different in purpose. Krishna is also trying to deliver everyone back to his shelter. He's giving so many directions, but people are not taking. Manmana bhava mad bhakto. Such simple things. Always think of me, become my devotee, worship me, offer your obeisance to me. Thus you will come to me without fail. He's giving promises. So this is the essence. It's like what is that verse? Mat karma kurin, mat paramo, mat bhakta sangavajata, niravira sarva bhuteshu. And Prabhupada elaborates that this verse is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. The essence. So many hints are there. So many instructions. So many opportunities. If one thinks, I cannot do this service, then he can do any other service, whatever is there. If he's thinking, I cannot do book distribution, then he can worship the deity. If he cannot worship the deity, then he can clean the temple. All these things are there. Tan mandira marjanado. He can cook for the deity. He can dress the deity. He can clean the temple for the deity. But book distribution, why is it so essential? Because by this effort, by this Sankirtan, by this Brihat Mridanga, then the world will be delivered. The Mridanga can only be heard a very short distance. Sometimes we hear when the devotees are coming back from the Sankirtan party, when they reach to the block at the top of the street, we can hear them. Such a sweet sound, so uplifting, so reassuring that in Kali Yuga there are the devotees of the Lord who are strictly following, selflessly delivering the holy name to anyone who cares to hear. Whether he cares or not to hear, actually. He's still hearing, he's being bent. But by this Brihat Mridanga, there's like this Rath Yatra festival. The devotee told me that he started, as soon as he set up, he began distributing the books, and he could not stop, even for 1 minute, distributing books. He could not even go to visit any other tent, Harinam tent, Prasadam tent, gift shop tent. So many tents were there, he said, I couldn't leave. From start to finish, I was there selling the books. This is the interest, this is the benefit of Kali Yuga. Kalera dosanidhi rajanasti eka mahaguna kirtanareva krishnasya mukta sangasya jayate. That the holy name is being propagated, and by the attractive sound vibration, the people are coming in contact. And because their hearts are relieved temporarily, they go to see the books, and these books, like the Supreme Lord himself, are all attractive. Someone puts this book in his hand and he thinks, yes, this is a valuable whatever, possession, soon to be possession. It is actually the most valuable thing because it is the means to deliver him from the cycle of birth and death. And so these devotees are doing this service, and hundreds and hundreds of books were being distributed. And this is how it should be every single day. But on that day, of course, with so much concentrated energy, transcendental energy. It was inevitable that there would be such a reception, and that so many of the books, and that so much prasadam would be distributed. So for our purposes, we should never leave the house of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. There is no need. If anyone is finding some superficial reason, some minor quarrel, because after all Kali Yuga means quarrel and hypocrisy, then he should understand that this is Maya. If Maya is telling you that I have to go outside the temple to do something, then that is either he is not being properly counseled by his intelligence, and he is not taking the counsel of those who can guide him properly. And this happens. Someone is thinking, oh, I can do something else. We do something else under the direction of the superior authority. The most superior authority is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. And in our parampara, we place emphasis on Prabhudatta Desh. That place which is given to us by the spiritual master for his preaching pleasure, not our preaching pleasure. It may not be nice for us, but because he wants it, therefore it is our life and soul. It is our duty. You know, if necessary, we saw, like we were reading in the recent biographies of Brahmananda and Garga Muni, how they were asked to preach in Pakistan. This has to be one of the hardest places to preach Krishna consciousness. But they're willing to do whatever Prabhupada said. So they went, and they had success. In the same way, Prabhupada sent devotees to Iran, and the devotees also had great success. But it was overshadowed due to the envious nature of those persons practicing this nirvishesha shunyavadi philosophy that relegates God to some impersonal, formless, speechless entity. So this is our duty. And for us, New York is not like Pakistan, not like Iran. Whatever difficulties there are here for preaching are insignificant. Insignificant. Sometimes it's cold, sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's rainy. These things should be considered as insignificant, not an impediment. And then the only impediment remains is our mind. And the mind can be controlled. How? By hearing, chanting, tasting the holy name in its various forms. And this will give one complete satisfaction. And it is the case. Whenever we're disturbed, we know that all I have to do is chant the holy name and this disturbance is finished. Whatever it is, internally or externally. And one's faith increases through such experiences, that he takes shelter of the holy name and he is delivered from all fear. But if one is thinking, as the case of Vidura, which was just for our consideration, that he has to leave this place, but his efforts to leave had to be matched up with his efforts to seek higher instruction for his benefit and the benefit of those for whom this conversation is documented. So we will progress. These questions are very palatable, relishable, and one hears these things, This is the nectar. The Bhagavatam is compared to the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge. And Sukadeva Goswami is considered to be that agent by which that ripened fruit becomes even more relishable. So Prabhupada gave us the example. That's there in the Bhagavatam, that the mango fruit, which is pierced by the beak of the parrot, Shuka, becomes more sweet. So we'll stop here and take questions. We'll read the translations again, the two translations, text 1 and 2. Sukadeva Goswami said, after renouncing his prosperous home and entering the forest, King Vidura, the great devotee, asked this question of His Grace Maitreya Rishi. What else is there to say about the residential house of the Pandavas? Sri Krishna, the Lord of everything, acted as your minister. He used to enter that house as if it were his own, and he did not take any care of Duryodhana's house. Actually, Maitreya Rishi is challenging Maitreya, Vidura's intelligence with that response. That he didn't have to do that, but he did it. So make the best use of a bad bargain. Questions? Comments? Krishna Kripa Prabhu?
It was interesting when I went home. My sister's husband, he was saying that he was disturbed a lot by fear, and it made me realize how fortunate we are, because we're definitely not afraid, because we have all this transcendental knowledge, how we're eternal, how Krishna protects his devotees, and whereas he's not so situated nicely.
Yeah, fear is actually a symptom of ignorance. This is the thing. And we see that the population in general is controlled by utilizing fear. And so therefore, without higher information, it's very difficult to break free from that subjugation. Any questions, Mataji?
All we can do really is go out and Harinam and distribute books.
Yes.
Momentarily, when the people hear the holy name, they are relieved of their anxiety.
And they become receptive. And we see it's proven time and time again on a daily basis that wherever the Harinam party is, there is a transcendental atmosphere. It's like when the Lord descends upon earth, He brings His kingdom and all His opulence with Him and all His intimate associates. When the Harinam party is there, we understand that Lord Chaitanya is also there. Lord Nityananda is also there. All of their associates are also there. Because it becomes established. It's like the traveling roadshow. Prabhupada, sometimes we have that example. That Krishna is going from place to place, universe to universe, to manifest His pastimes. And every day the Harinam party goes out. And we understand that Kali Kali Namarupa, Krishna avatar, that in the age of Kali, Krishna descends as His holy name. And so wherever Krishna is, therefore, everything is there, all opulence. And so people can take advantage of it. When they approach the Harinam, they're entering into a transcendental atmosphere. So important. It should be done to maximize the effect of distribution of transcendental literature, there must be Harinam. Must be Harinam. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll get ready for darshan. Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.